I've made the only correct tier list for all the attachments inside XDEFIANT, and if you disagree with me, well, you're wrong. No, but in all seriousness, if you agree or disagree with any of the rankings I have in today's video, make sure to let me know down below, and without further ado, let's get straight into it. Alright, getting into our list, we have 6 different tiers, with the top one being called Any Gun, Anytime. This one is pretty simple. Any gun, anytime, you can use these attachments. And then as we scroll down the tiers, it is going to get worse and worse, and even under the trash tier, we have something I like to call a cursed build attachments, which after using some cursed builds myself, I can definitely tell you there are quite a few, so make sure to stick around for that. Alright, but getting into our attachments, we're going to be starting off with the muzzles, and first things first, we have the light suppressor. Now, personally, I'm not the biggest fan of suppressors in XDEFIANT, as most of the time I'm playing, I use Echelon, which already does the job of suppressor, keeping you off the minimap. And the light suppressor, believe it or not, is a little bit misleading, not keeping you off the minimap completely. It does make it so that your red dot on the minimap does go away quicker, but you are still showing up when you fire your gun. Other than that, it does make it so your minimap is increased a little bit so you can see across it a little bit easier, but overall, definitely not a great attachment. I wouldn't put it in trash tier, but overall, probably a niche pick. Alright, next up we have the Muzzle Booster, which got a pretty big change in Season 2, honestly making it a lot worse. Currently, the only benefit to this thing is having a 2.5% increase to your rate of fire, which with the introduction of the Highwayman makes this thing honestly not that great. The negatives are pretty insane too, giving you a total of 12.5% negatives to your range, as well as a 7.5% hit to your ADS speed. The Muzzle Booster is definitely not an attachment I would like to use, and honestly, I like to stay away from it. For that reason, we're going to put it in trash tier. Alright, but next we have the Barrel Extender, which is honestly one of the best attachments in this game. Probably not good enough for any gun anytime, but easily in the easy pick category. This will give you a nice 10% increase to your short and medium range, and pairing this with the chrome line barrel like I do on a lot of my builds, you start to shoot down range like crazy. The negatives are not too noticeable either, with only a negative 10% hit to your sprint out time, which honestly not going to be too noticeable, and the rest is a negative 10% to your ADS stability, which honestly on fully automatic guns I do not notice at all. On snipers, you're definitely going to notice it, so make sure to stay away from that on snipers, but for any other gun, don't worry about that at all. Alright, next up we have the Muzzle Brake, which is honestly another really solid attachment. The positives to this guy are giving you a 7% increase to your horizontal recoil control, and the negatives not noticeable at all, with a negative 5% to your short range and medium range. This turns out to be only 1 or 2 meters for pretty much any gun in the game, so you're really only getting the positives out of this. So for that reason, it's going to join the Barrel Extender in the easy picks tier. Alright, next we have another recoil attachment with the Compensator. This one is the opposite of the horizontal, giving you 7% to your vertical recoil, although the negatives are a little bit more noticeable. For this guy, you'll see a negative 10% hit to your ADS speed, which honestly not too noticeable on its own, but with other attachment, you're definitely going to start noticing it. So most of the time, you're going to have to put something else on your class to counteract this, unlike the Muzzle Brake, which really has no negatives. Other than that, you also get a negative 5% to your ADS stability, which, like I said, not too noticeable. But once again, this guy isn't as easy of a pick as the Muzzle Brake or the Barrel Extender, as you're going to have to put some attachments around it to actually make it shine. So for that reason, we're going to put it in serviceable. Alright, next up, we have a real suppressor this time, and although this one does keep you off the minimap at all times, honestly, it's still not the greatest pick, and probably a niche pick again. Other than staying off the minimap, you're not really going to be seeing too many positives with this guy, and the negatives are a 10% hit to your range, which honestly, not going to be what you want to use. Unless you're pairing it with the chrome line barrel, which you could do that on some classes, but like again, definitely a niche pick. We're going to leave it there. Alright, but getting into our last muzzle, we have the Fluted Muzzle, which a lot of you guys might not even know exists, as it's only on sniper rifles. Personally, I'm a big fan of this attachment, as it just adds a lot of fun. This attachment gives you a nice 12.5% increase to your hip fire spread, which is extremely nice, especially on sniper rifles, which have no hip fire at all. Having this on definitely helps out with no scopes. It's probably not the best pick, as the negatives give you a negative 10% to your sprint out time and ADS stability, which on sniper rifles is definitely going to be noticeable, but hitting some no scopes, it's worth the negatives. To stay as unbiased as possible, even though I love this attachment, we'll definitely keep it in niche picks. When you're trying to do as good as you can with the sniper rifle, maybe don't pick this attachment, but when you're trying to have some fun, definitely throw it on. Alright, getting into our next set of attachments, we have the barrels, and first things first, we have the Recon Barrel. Now, this guy does a very similar job to the light suppressor, although it does come with some positives and negatives, but being the same thing as the light suppressor basically, we're just instantly going to put it in niche picks. The positives to this guy, other than doing the same thing as the light suppressor, are giving you 5% ADS speed, which honestly, it's pretty nice, but not too noticeable. And then for the negatives, you're going to be seeing a 2.5% negative to your movement speed, which honestly, going to want to stay away from that. For most attachments that add negatives to your movement speed, I would try to stay away from them unless they are a really good one. There are definitely a few that we'll get to in a little bit that do add some negatives to the movement speed, but the positives, they severely outweigh them. But for this guy, is not the case. Alright, but next up, we have the Stabilizing Barrel, which personally, I don't really see a point in this attachment. The positives are 2.5% 2% increase to your horizontal and vertical recoil control, which honestly 2.5%, I feel like I'm not going to notice that at all. The negatives aren't too noticeable either, giving you negative 5% to your sprint out time and strafe speed, but overall this attachment is kind of just there. I wouldn't say it's trash, as it's not going to add like negatives to your gun, but it's also not like a niche pick. It's somewhere in the middle. We'll leave it at the bottom of niche picks. Definitely not the greatest. Alright, but next up we have the Chrome Line Barrel, which personally is my go-to barrel in XDEFIANT other than the lightweight. This guy is extremely strong in my opinion. The negatives are definitely a little bit noticeable, giving you a 5% hit to your moon speed and a 15% hit to your ADS speed, but getting that 20% increase to your short and medium range is definitely going to outweigh those negatives in my opinion. Especially on certain guns, the SMGs in this game, I feel like definitely need them. Unless you're using the heavy barrel like on some of the SMGs we'll get to in a little bit, you're definitely going to want to use the Chrome Line Barrel. And then even for assault rifles, adding the Chrome Line Barrel, believe it or not, makes this extremely powerful, as it's adding a percentage on. So when you already have a large number for your range, that percentage is going to make it increased even more compared to SMGs, so it is super strong on those two. It might not be good enough for any gun anytime, as you definitely have to have the right attachments around it, but it is definitely an easy pick. Putting the right attachments around this thing, like the Superlight front rail, lightweight stock, and the quick draw rear grip, this thing becomes extremely powerful, and honestly, one of the best attachments in this game. So with that, we're going to leave this guy all the way at the top of easy picks, and honestly, he might stay at the top. Alright, next up we have the heavy barrel, and this attachment is actually extremely strong, just on the right guns. The heavy barrel makes it so your damage is increased 5%, so on guns that have 19 damage, you increase that to 20, making so you have one less shot to kill. This is extremely powerful. There's not a whole lot of guns that it'll do this with, but the MP7, MDR, Vector, and even the SVD and Mark 20 are just to name a few that it is really good on. But with it only being good on those few guns, it's definitely a niche pick, but definitely towards the top. This attachment is really good. Alright, next up we have the Stealth Barrel, which honestly I've grown to like quite a bit. So obviously it's in the name, Stealth Barrel. You're not going to be seen on the minimap, so this is basically just like the Suppressor, but it doesn't give you negatives to your range. It actually gives you positives, a plus 10% to your short and medium range. Now the negatives are definitely noticeable, with a 5% negative to your movement speed and 2.5% to your rate of fire, but when you pair this with the Highwaymen and the right attachments like the lightweight stock and the Superlight grip, this is a really good attachment. For the ranking, as badly as I do want to put it in serviceable, it's definitely another niche pick, but with the right attachments, once again, this is a really good attachment. Alright, but moving on, we have the lightweight barrel, which like I said earlier, is another one of the barrels that I absolutely love. This attachment is so strong. Especially if you have a faster playstyle, this attachment is definitely for you, as the positives will give you a 5% to your movement speed and 15% to your ADS speed. You are going to start zooming around the map with this thing. The negatives are going to be a little bit noticeable if you're not too good with the recoil control, as you're going to be seeing a 10% hit to your vertical and horizontal recoil control. But honestly, on most guns, the recoil pattern is pretty predictable, so putting this attachment on is not too bad, especially once you learn those patterns. It is really good. Personally, I'm a big fan of pairing this guy along with the folded stock to get you a total of 10% to your movement speed. You really start to fly around the map, and especially on LMGs, this attachment is a must. So with all that being said, I think this is going to be our first attachment that lands in any gun, anytime. Like I said, you definitely have to get the recoil pattern down, but once you do, you can throw this attachment on any gun at any time and you are going to succeed. Alright, but next up we are going to the complete opposite end of the spectrum. We have the rapid fire barrel. This is another one of the attachments similar to the Muzzle Booster that got a big change for the negative with Season 2. Right now, the only positives are a 5% increase to rate of fire, which is pretty nice, but like I said, once again, with the Highwayman being introduced into this game, I feel like this attachment is honestly not that strong, especially when the negatives are so noticeable, a negative 15% to your ADS speed and 25% to your range. No, people try to tell me to use this attachment. I will not do it. 25% range is too much, bro. I just can't do it. Like I said, this attachment for me at least is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. I know some people do like it, but just to piss you guys off, we're putting in the Curse Builds attachment. I absolutely hate this attachment. Alright, but getting back into the positive light, next up we have the Choke, which is basically the Chrome Line Barrel just for the shotguns. This attachment is definitely another must use, especially on every single shotgun. It'll give you a nice 15% to your range, 5% to your hip fire, and the negatives not too noticeable at all, with only 15% to your sprint out time. The positives severely outweigh the negatives on this guy, so once again, this is definitely a must use on every single shotgun. For that, we're going to put it in any gun, anytime. Obviously, can't use it on any gun, it's only on shotguns, but if you're using a shotgun, make sure to use this attachment. Alright, but getting into our last barrel, we have the Fluted Barrel, which once again is only for sniper rifles, but this one gives you pretty much double of what the Fluted Muzzle does, but also double of the negatives. For this guy, you'll be seeing a total of 25% increase to your hip fire, which is definitely solid if you're trying to hit some no scopes. Definitely throw this on, but the negatives are pretty crazy on this guy. Negative 5% to your movement speed and 15% to your ADS speed. Personally, I'm not too big of a fan of this attachment. After using this guy a little bit, I really don't see me using it again. fan, so for that reason, we're going to leave it in trash tier. Definitely not an attachment I would use. Alright, but that is going to do for the barrels. Now, let's move on to the front rails, and first things first, we have the Superlight front rail, which is honestly one of my favorite front rails in this game. The positives are super nice on this guy, especially if you're going for a faster playstyle, and it pairs extremely well with a whole lot of attachments. And the negatives on this guy is only going to be negative 10% to your recoil recovery, which I'm convinced that does absolutely nothing. Let me know down below. If you know what that does, please let me know, because I'm convinced it does nothing, man. For the positives, like I said, it would be a little bit faster, giving you a 10% to your ADS speed and 2.5% to your movement speed. The movement speed not going to be too noticeable, but like I said, pairing that with the other few attachments that give you movement speed, this is going to make it extremely useful. So with all those reasons, this is definitely an easy pick. Once again, pairing this with some attachments like the lightweight stock, it is really good. Alright, but next up, we have the angled front rail, which honestly, I think is pretty bad. The positives of this guy are going to give you 5% to your horizontal recoil, which is pretty nice, and then another 15% to your ADS stability, which once again, on fully automatic guns, not too noticeable. But the negatives on this guy are going to give you 5% to your movement speed, which honestly, gonna want to stay away from that. Like I said, if you're going to put negative to your movement speed, make sure the positives are way better than just 5% to your horizontal recoil. For this attachment, in my opinion, it's just trash. I do not like it at all. Alright, but next up, we have a way better attachment with the vertical front rail. This guy is really solid, with the positives being 10% to vertical recoil control, and the negatives not too noticeable at all, only 5% to your ADS speed and straight speed. Definitely a solid attachment. If you struggle with recoil in this game, make sure to throw this guy on. It is definitely an easy pick. Alright, but next up, we are going back and forth from good to bad. We have the tactical front rail. This guy, I'm just going to say it off rip, it's trash. The positives give you 35% to recoil recovery, which once again, I'm convinced that does nothing. So other than that, it only gives you 5% to your ADS speed and 5% negative to your straight speed. Honestly, this attachment, it's kind of just useless. You know what? I'm going to add another tier for the useless attachments category. There are some useless attachments in this game, and this is definitely one of them. And other than that, honestly, I think we can go ahead and throw the Recon Barrel and the Stabilizing Barrel in there. They're not too bad, but they're also not really that good. They're pretty useless. Alright, but getting back to our next attachment, we have the small Vert front rail, which personally is gotta be my favorite front rail in XDEFIANT. This attachment is extremely good, with the negatives not being noticeable really at all, with it being 15% to hip fire. You're really not hip firing in XDEFIANT anyway. The hip fire is honestly really bad, so it's not going to be too bad if you're adding negatives on it. The positives on this guy are super solid, giving you a nice 10% to your straight speed and another 5% to your ADS speed. This attachment, you cannot go wrong. Honestly, it's another one of the attachments that really can go on any gun at any time, so we're going to leave it in there. Alright, but moving on, speaking of hip fire, next up, we have the laser, or the PEQ 15. I'm not sure why they don't just call it a laser. Whatever, man. But like I said, hip fire in XDEFIANT, honestly, not that great. Me personally, I stay away from this attachment. The negatives are really not there at all. I think it does show your laser at the hip, so that's really the only negative that is there. And other than that, it gives you a nice 40% to hip fire, which is nice, but honestly, hip fire overall, it's just not that strong. This attachment is probably a niche pick, but it's also kind of useless. I'll leave it a niche pick and be nice. Alright, but next up we have the Handstop, which is basically the same exact thing as the angled front rail. The only difference is it gives you vertical recoil control, but you're still going to be seeing that 5% hit to your movement speed. Overall, this attachment, it's kind of trash. Definitely don't want to put that on. Alright, but getting into our last two front rails, next up we have the leather wrap front rail, which honestly, it's a good attachment, but it really just gets outshined by the small Vert. Obviously, with it being a leather wrapped attachment, it's going to give you that straight speed with a nice 15% to that, which is super nice. But the negatives are definitely going to be a little bit noticeable, giving you 10% to your ADS speed and another 5% to your sprint out time. Like I said, the small Vert, it really just outshines this guy. The small Vert will give you 5% less to your straight speed, but you're not going to be getting that hit to your ADS speed or your sprint out time. So overall, I definitely prefer that attachment. So as much as I love these straight speed attachments, and I hate to do it to this guy, we're going to put it in the useless category. If you want straight speed on this attachment and you're using the front rail, just use a small Vert. Alright, last but not least, we have the pistol front rail, which is honestly a really slept on attachment. The negatives on this guy are not noticeable at all, only giving you 5% to your horizontal recoil, which honestly, if you have good recoil control, you were good to go. The positives on this guy will give you 10% to your sprint out time, as well as a nice 20% to your fire. This attachment, you really can't go wrong. It's another one of those attachments that really are extremely strong. I wouldn't say it's as good as any gun anytime, but it is definitely an easy pick, so we're going to leave this guy towards the top of easy pick as well. Alright, but next up we have our rear grips, which personally, I'm only a fan of like 2 of these guys. 3 of them aren't bad, but 2 of them I'm really only using. First up, we have the heavy grip. For this guy, you'll be getting a positive 10% to the amount of flinch you get, so it'll be a little bit less flinch, which honestly, not too noticeable unless you're using a sniper, which if you're using a sniper, you're going to want more ADS speed. So the quick draw rear grip is definitely going to be the one you want to go to, especially when using a sniper. For this guy, probably a useless attachment. Really not that good, really not that bad. It's kind of useless. Alright, but next up we have the fabric grip, which is definitely a solid attachment, giving you a nice 10% to your ADS speed, 5% to your ADS stability, and the only negative is negative 10% to recoil recovery, which once again does nothing. So this attachment, it's definitely serviceable, but honestly, I'm a big fan of the quick draw instead of this guy. It's a serviceable attachment. It's definitely not a niche pick or useless or trash. It's serviceable. Alright, but next up we have the leather up grip, which is honestly one of my favorite grips in this game. This is a really solid attachment. The negatives are only going to be 5% to your sprint out time, and the positives give you a nice 10% to your straight speed. Pairing this with other straight speed attachments make this extremely good. Honestly, you can put this on any gun at any time and you'll succeed. Alright, but next up we have the grip tape, and honestly, this attachment, it's serviceable. It's another attachment that gives you some positives to recoil recovery, so kind of useless. It also gives you 5% to your vertical recoil control, and then the negatives are 5% to your ADS speed. This attachment, it's not that bad, but it's not that great. There's definitely some other attachments and grips that I would prefer over this guy, but it's definitely serviceable. Alright, but getting into our next grip, next up we have the lightweight grip, which honestly, straight up, it's just useless, man. This guy will give you 2.5% to your straight speed, which honestly, you're not going to notice at all. Another 25% to recoil recovery, and then a negative 5% to your flinch control. This attachment is really just the most unnoticeable attachment in the game. It's just useless, man. It is the most useless of useless attachments. What are you doing with this attachment, man? Alright, last but not least, we have the quick draw grip, and like I've been gassing up this whole time, this attachment is amazing, man. The negatives are only minus 15% to your ADS stability, which once again, on fully automatic guns, not going to be noticeable. Even on sniper rifles, I use it, and I don't notice it too much. And then the positives, you're getting a nice 10% to your sprint out time and ADS speed, making it just a lot faster. This is definitely a must-use attachment on a lot of guns in XDEFIANT. And for me, I feel like you can put it on any gun at any time, so we're definitely going to leave it up there. Personally, right above the leather wrap grip. This guy is definitely my favorite. Alright, but getting on to our next set of attachments, we have the magazines, which are only a few, so we'll get through these guys quick. First up, we have the Quick Mag, which is honestly the best magazine in my opinion. There's no negatives to this guy, and the positives are super nice, giving you 15% to your reload speed, and another about 20% to your magazine capacity. Most guns, you'll get a nice 5 bullets. The SVD and stuff, you'll get like 2 bullets, so it's a nice 20% increase. Really solid attachment. I'm debating on putting it at the top of easy picks or at the bottom of any gun anytime, but since it has no negatives, honestly, I think we're going to leave it at any gun anytime. This attachment is honestly really good. Alright, but next up, we have the bonus mags, which is another really solid attachment for the magazine. If you're camo grinding, definitely throw this guy on if you're running out of bullets. It's definitely a must-use attachment if you're going on high kill streaks in XDEFIANT, as it gives you 4 more magazines, as well as a nice 10% to reload speed, and the negatives are only 2.5% to your reload speed. Throwing on the lightweight stock or the Superlight FR, you were going to counteract this immediately, so it is really good attachment. I would say it's only good if you're going on kill streaks and camo grinding and team deathmatch, so for that reason, we'll probably leave it in niche picks, but definitely towards the top. This is a really good attachment. Alright, next up, we have both of our extended mags, one for the regular guns and one for the shotguns, and actually, they are going to rank completely separate. For the regular guns, the extended mag is honestly not that great. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of it. It'll give you minus 5% to your movement speed, which honestly, I really don't find the positives outweighing that. Personally, I would definitely use the fast mag or quick mag over this guy, but it's definitely not a bad attachment by any means. With the right attachments around it, it is really good. So for that reason, we're going to put it in serviceable. Nothing special, but with the right attachments around it, it can definitely be good. Also, quick shout out to the L86. Make sure you're using the extended mag on that gun. That is the one exception. You get double the amount of bullets. It is extremely powerful on that gun. Alright, next we have the extended mag just for the shotguns, and like I said, this guy's going to be on the opposite end. This guy is a lot better than the extended mag on the regular guns. For me personally, I use it on every single one of my shotguns. The negatives for this guy are only 2.5% to your movement speed instead of 5%, so it's really not too noticeable, and then you're getting that 2 extra bullets. It is really good. For the pump shotgun, it is a must use, and for the SPAS 12, you can get away without it, but personally, I like to use it just for a little bit more fun. And then I'll also be counting this guy for the AA12, although it is a little bit different, but the AA12 always make sure you have an extended mag. For those reasons, this guy, any gun, anytime, once again, it's just like the choke being only for shotguns, but if you're using a shotgun, make sure to use these 2 attachments. And also a third must-use attachment if you are using shotguns, it's not going to be up here, but the pistol grip. This pairs extremely well with shotguns. Definitely pair it with the extended tube and the choke. It is really good. Alright, but for our last magazine, we have the fast mag, and like I said, I'm a big fan of this guy. Lately, I've been using on a lot of classes, but you have to have the right bit around it. But having that 40% to your reload speed, you are reloading so fast on pretty much every single gun in the game. It's a solid attachment, but nothing too crazy. It's definitely serviceable. Like I said, with the right attachments around it, it can definitely be good. Alright, but next up, we have our optics, which honestly don't need too many explanations. If you're using anything besides the reflex or the hollow if you're a Nightfall fan, what are you doing, man? The 3 times, 4 times, 4 to 8 times, 8 times, and 12 times, unless you're using a sniper. What are you doing, man? These scopes are horrendous. Honestly, we're going to put every single one of these guys into the cursed builds, except maybe the 12 times scope. We'll leave that guy just for snipers. But if you're using any of these sights on any other gun besides the sniper rifle, What are you doing, man? Maybe we'll put the 3 times up a tier or 2 as the magnification isn't too crazy, but 4 times, 4 to 8, or the 8 times, if you're using that on a fully automatic gun, man, you are going to be struggling. Other than that, of course, we got the regular reflex sight. Honestly, I'm a big fan of iron sights, so we're not going to put this guy on any gun anytime, because personally, any gun anytime, I'm using the iron sights. But once again, it is definitely an easy pick, and probably the best sight, unless you're Nightfall. And speaking of Nightfall, next up, we got the hollow sight. I know this guy loves it, and you know what, for some brownie points, he's in the any gun anytime tier. The hollow sight, it actually gives you minus 5% to your recoil control. So you get better recoil control and you actually get 15% to your stray speed. The hollow sight, you can't go wrong. It's OP. Make sure you use it. God, I feel like CNN. All right, and last but not least, we have the 12 times sniper scope. If you're using this on any other gun besides the snipers, you are going in the curse builds category. But for the snipers, it's definitely my go-to. Any gun anytime for the snipers, I definitely like this guy. All right, but finally getting into our last category, we have these stocks, which honestly, there's only a few that are good. First off, we have the padded stock, which honestly, it's pretty good. It gives you no negatives, but the positives are really not too noticeable either, giving you 15% to your recoil recovery. You also get 10% to your ADS stability, and then another 5% to your flinch control. Once again, this is another one of the attachments that are honestly, they're just useless. I mean, they're pretty good for some sniper rifles or some attachments. If you want to just throw it on, you can't go wrong, but honestly, it's pretty useless. All right, but next up, we have the precision stock, which honestly, I'm not too big of a fan of. It's none of the recoil attachment, so it'll give you 5% to your vertical and horizontal recoil control. But other than that, it gives you 10% to your ADS speed. Honestly, I'm not too big of a fan of this. I don't really use a lot of recoil attachments anyway. It's definitely a niche pick. It's not terrible, it's not useless, but it's a niche pick. All right, but moving on, we have the folded stock, and honestly, this is one of my favorite stocks in the game. This thing is really good. The negatives are not noticeable at all, only 10% to your fire. Once again, hip fire, not too noticeable in this game. And then the positives, 5% to your movement speed. This attachment is really solid. Honestly, it's another one of the attachments that we're going to put in any gun anytime. It is really, really good. All right, getting into our last few, next up, we have the reinforced stock, which is another attachment that is just... it's not good. For this guy, you'll be getting a negative 15% to your stray speed, which if you know me, that is just my kryptonite. I will stay away from this all the time, man. That is just too much. The positives, not too noticeable either. 25% to your flinch control, which you can use it on a sniper rifle, but honestly, with the amount of flinch, you're still not going to notice it. And then other than that, you'll also be getting a nice 10% to your ADS stability, which honestly, not too noticeable. This attachment, like I said, with that negative 15% to the stray speed, it just makes it trash to me. For me, we're going to put it in the trash tier. All right, next up, we have the remove stock, which is basically like the folded stock, just smoking crack. For this guy, you'll be getting that 5% increase to your movement speed, and then another 20% increase to your sprint out time. The negatives aren't too crazy either, with only negative 10% to your flinch control, and then 5% to your vertical and horizontal recoil. So this attachment, it's definitely pretty good. Although you can't use it on a whole lot of guns, it is definitely a really good pick, and definitely an easy pick, so we're going to leave it in there. And then last but not least, if you guys have been around this channel, you know how much I love this attachment. We have the lightweight stock. This attachment, it honestly, I think it's my favorite in the game. I use it probably on the most guns in XDEFIANT. The 20% to your stray speed is just extremely powerful, especially pairing that with like the small vert front rail. Man, you are starting strafe like crazy. It also gives you a nice 2.5% increase to your movement speed, so it makes it a really good attachment to pair along with the Superlight front rail and the chrome line barrel. Other than that, the negatives you are going to be getting is 20% to your ADS stability, which is not going to be too noticeable unless you're using a sniper rifle, and then also a negative 10% to your ADS speed. But if you go ahead and put on the quick draw rear grip, you are not going to have a problem at all. This attachment is definitely my go-to, and honestly, my favorite in the game. Real quick though, I'm going to see if I want to re-rank any of these guys respective on their tiers, so I'll be right back. Alright, we are back. I re-ranked a bunch of things respective to their rank, so pretty much everything on this list is going to be in order from the top down. So if you just go down the list, everything in there is in order. We got 49 total attachments, so hopefully I didn't miss anything. If I did, please don't roast me in the comments. Other than that though, guys, once again, definitely let me know if you guys agree or disagree with any of the rankings. I'm going to be live today and tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern time, so make sure to check out the streams, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Later. And of course, a huge shout out to our channel members, Dex, Kelvin, and Gabriel. Love you guys.